Hey, it's Andrew, and I want to take a minute to tell you about the Podcast Panacea. If you want to create a podcast or already have one that could use a little TLC, the Podcast Panacea is for you. Are you about to make a purchase on expensive studio equipment? Stop. Save your money. The Podcast Panacea will teach you how to sound professional and interview anyone from anywhere with the most secret tricks of the trade. Email info@podcastpanacea.com or go to podcastpanacea.com to learn more. You can also find the link in our show notes. The Podcast Panacea is the cure-all for your podcast.
If in my high moments I have done some good, offered some service, shed some light, healed some wounds, rekindled some hope, or stirred some warmth of apathy and indifference, or in any way along the way helped somebody, then this campaign has not been in vain.
With your host, Andrew Gordon.
Adell Bridges, welcome to the Yoga Moves You podcast. It is a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
To be here for you is subjective because you're all over the place. So where are you right now?
Well, right now I'm in my sister's apartment in Tampa, Florida, in between teaching jobs.
Oh, okay. Well, I am visiting Miami, Florida, so I'll wave across from the east to the west of Florida.
We're practically neighbors.
We are, practically, yes. So where are you originally from?
Originally, I am from Mississippi. That's where I grew up. It's where I was born and raised.
What part of Mississippi? Because early in my radio career, I worked in the Laurel Hattiesburg market.
No way. Okay, I'm from very close to there, but I actually grew up in a very small town called Puerto.
I know Puerto. Come on. We were huge in Puerto. I worked for SL100.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. SL100.
You may have been there when I was there because literally it was about 15 years ago.
Wow. That is crazy. Yeah, I was living in Puerto 15 years ago.
Oh, my gosh. I went by the name AG. I was on at night, 7 to midnight.
Oh, wow. This is so cool. Heard you on the radio. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Myself and Don King, who's still there, is a good friend of mine. So anyway, wow. Growing up in Puerto, what kind of things did you do besides, of course, listening to SL100?
Sorry, I'm laughing because my sister just came in. She didn't know that we were recording, and she was like, oh, wow, SL100.
Yeah, that's what's up.
What did I do in Puerto besides listening to SL100?
Sure.
As a small child, from the age of like 5 to 12-ish, I was a gymnast, then quit that sport because I loved it, but it's a very intense sport, and if you want to carry on with it, you kind of have to like dedicate your whole life to it. And then I was a cheerleader at Puerto High.
Nice.
For a few years. I think back to my time growing up there, and the memories that kind of come up first are, related to the activities that I did, like sports and stuff. I was on the swim team, and I don't know. For some reason, that's what I think of first when I think of my upbringing there in Mississippi.
It's funny because when I was called for the job, I was like, where is Mississippi? I literally didn't know. And I looked on, Google didn't exist at the time. So I looked on MapQuest and I was like, wow, that's far. Because I was up in New York on Long Island. And I went down there, had no idea what to expect. And it was a lot different than I expected. Like, you can find people that are open-minded anywhere and people that are closed-minded anywhere. So that's the big thing that I took away from there.
That's one of the things that I've realized traveling around the world is that people are people wherever you go. You're going to get people who are kind and friendly and people who are jerks and people who are shy and people who are outgoing. Like, it's just, culture only defines us to a certain point.
Yes, absolutely. I will say, though, until I changed my New York plates to Mississippi, the radio station at the time was still in Laurel, which was the older part of the area. And my drive, I did the night show from 7 to midnight. So when I would drive home at night, I got pulled over 3 times within my first 2 months there with my New York plates because they're like, "What are you doing here?" I was like,
Yeah.
"I work at the radio station," and then they finally figure it out and let me go.
Yeah, who's this foreigner?
Yeah, there was nothing like your taillight's out. No, it's not. It is now. There was none of that. After pedal, where did you head on to? Did you go away to school?
Yes.
What happens next?
So I well, I went to the University of Southern Mississippi, which is in Hattiesburg. And
Golden Eagles. Whoop.
Yeah. And I was literally about, I don't know, maybe a week into my freshman year, and I thought, what have I done? This is university. This is my chance to go like somewhere and, somewhere new. And I'm just like surrounded by like the same old environment. So I remember I skipped one of my lectures so I could go to the study abroad office, and I was like, please send me away somewhere. And just to cut it short, I ended up then studying abroad in Wales in the UK, which is another area like Mississippi that most people don't actually know where it is, and they have to look on a map.
Well, I'm one of those people. So where about in England, which we do have a pretty good listening audience. It's in the top 4 countries or 3 countries that listen. Where is Wales fall in England?
Well, there you go. That's the mistake that people make. People think that Wales is in England, and it is not.
Oh.
It is an entirely separate country.
So much for me, what I know.
Yeah, no, but this is, I mean, it's not just Americans, it's, Europeans and everybody I meet, like so many people, they're like, oh, where in England is Wales? And I'm like, there is no Wales in England. It's next to England. Yeah, they have like their own culture, their own language, their own like parliament and everything. They're part of the UK. So it's kind of like Northern Ireland and Scotland are also separate from England, and the 4 countries together make up the UK.
Wow. Okay.
Islands and stuff. Yeah, it's very complicated. Please don't ask me to explain it any further than that, because I don't understand exactly how it all works.
I'm kind of envisioning the equivalent would be like Puerto Rico for America. In my mind, the closest I could come up with.
Maybe something like that. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Something like that.
So, but yeah, no, that's very interesting. And it's quite different, I'm sure, than pedal.
Yes. In many, many ways it is. And also in a lot of ways it's very similar.
Can you get into that a little bit? Because that's an interesting way of looking at it. I wouldn't have expected that answer. So I certainly would love you to elaborate on that as someone that was in right where you're from for years, for like two years.
Well, I mean, it's an entirely different climate. For example, Mississippi is hot, and Wales pretty much like never gets warm. It's always cold. Wales is very hilly and lots of mountains, and Mississippi is flat. But I suppose it's that kind of that feel to a culture, to a community that comes from years of, I guess, poverty and the industries being kind of failing. In Mississippi, they just those people back years ago, they just didn't want to change, and as a result, Mississippi went from, after the Civil War and everything, Mississippi went from being one of the richest states to one of the poorest, and it still is the same way today. And Wales is similar in that way because it's always been kind of like pushed around by England. Like Wales has so many castles, and it's because every single time they fought with England, like either England or the English or the Welsh would build a castle, and if you go to Wales, like there are just castles everywhere. It's not even a big deal. It's like, oh yeah, another castle, whatever.
That had to be some culture shock. I mean, just the aesthetics of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's one of the ways that it's very different. And sheep everywhere. I remember when I first arrived, I was like, oh my gosh, there's sheep, because I had only ever seen sheep in a zoo. And in Wales, there's like 3 times as many sheep as people. And so everybody was like, why are you freaking out about sheep? But
yeah, and you would say that about cows. Of course, in Mississippi, I saw a lot of cows, I think.
Yeah, I guess there's lots of cows in Mississippi. There's lots of cows like in the UK as well, though.
Yeah.
There's lots of cows in India too. There's just lots of cows.
Yeah. Shout out to the cows.
Yeah, I love cows.
But also, where you came from in Mississippi, it's known as the Pine Belt. So you had those huge trees all over the place,
Yeah.
the pine trees. I'm sure in Wales it was a little different.
Yeah. Whenever I would tell people about that in Wales, they would be like, "Oh, that sounds so lovely," and I'd be like, "Oh, I guess maybe it is." Like, I never thought of like everywhere just being covered in pine trees being lovely, but at first I would tell people when I first moved there, I'd be like, "No, it's not." But then I realized that, of course, it's not for me because I grew up there, but for somebody that's never been to some place like Mississippi and, you know, has grown up in Wales where it's, I don't know, lots of different trees, ash and oak and maple and beech, and I don't know. I'm not a tree expert, but they might find that interesting or lovely.
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, we always want what we don't have, or we're fascinated by things that are not as familiar. And familiarity on its worst edge could breed contempt. You know, you could kind of get tired and sick of the familiar.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So what were you studying when you went abroad?
Psychology.
Okay. Did you continue all the way through in Wales?
Yeah. So I did a year abroad in Wales, and then I really didn't want to go back to Mississippi, but I had to finish my degree. And I remember telling my parents, I was like, "No, I'm just not going to finish. I don't care. I'm going to stay here." And they were like, "No way, you're coming back." And sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I had been like, "No, I don't care about this degree. I'm staying here." But I went back.
A lot different.
Yeah. I went back to Mississippi and I took more classes than I needed to so that I could finish in a year and then leave again, because I just really didn't want to be in Mississippi. But then when I did finish, so I graduated a year early. But then when I did finish, I was like, "Oh, okay, what now?" And I thought, I'm not ready to be an adult. So I thought, well, I'll just go back to Wales. I liked it there. So I went back to Wales to do a master's degree in creative writing, because how easy would it be? Like, I mean, all I had to do was write poems. And I could be like, "Oh yeah, I have a master's degree."
You know what's interesting about that, Adele, that you say that? Now, that's a natural talent for you, right? Like I'm assuming that's a natural inclination for you to be a creative type, to write, because you chose that. And you would say it's easy. But I've spoken to people, because that's how I am, right? Like I mean, I definitely are more on the creative side, but I've met people who are more into the accounting, mathematical type of people, and they would like cringe and be terrified to go into creative writing, whereas people like myself, and I'm assuming, well, I don't like to assume, but I'm going to hypothesize you would feel trapped if we went into accounting or something like that was, you know.
Oh yeah, you just gave me shudders all through my body, the thought of having to do accounting.
Did your chest tighten up?
Yeah, a little bit.
It is crazy though, because at times in my life as a creative, you know, being that it's not as well defined at times, there were wishes or these feelings that, gosh, why couldn't I just be wired to be an accountant? You know, because this gets a little confusing and I need to figure it all out as a creative, and you know, it's not as defined, but in the end it works out if you stick with it. But yeah, I think on the left brain side, people who write with their right hand, where it's more mathematical and accounting like, everything is just like, you do this, you do that, here's your career, boom, you're done. And I think there's something beautiful to that. But in the end, I just don't think it's for me, and probably not for you either.
Well, yeah, but this is the beautiful thing, is we are all different. We're all so unique and individual. And so that's what money is for, is to pay somebody that is good and enjoys doing something that you hate doing or you're not good at. Like my twin sister, I have an identical twin sister.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we even have the same, like we came from the same like fertilized egg, and then
Wow.
we had like the same DNA pretty much, but even she and I are different. And somehow she enjoys doing accounts more than me, and she actually helps me with my accounts.
That's beautiful.
But yeah, this is something that I'm super interested in, and everything that I do is just coming back to this key idea that we're all different. Of course, we're all made of the same stuff. So that's beautiful that we're all kind of connected in that way. Yes. But, just like when we are like starting off in life as this fertilized egg in our mother's womb, and the cells start dividing, and some of those cells become your liver cells, and some of those cells become your eyeball cells, and they all kind of do differently functioning things, and we're all so it's all still the same living being, the same person, the same little baby that's created, but within that living organism is cells doing their individual jobs. And that's kind of how I see all of us, as that, yeah, we're all made of the same stuff, but we're all slightly different. And so what works for you may not work for me. What works for me may not work for my sister. And that goes for everything, with, diet, with exercise, with relationships, everything.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think a lot of what our educational system, all the way through primary school into the first 2 years of college, if you're liberal arts, until you pick your major, it's focused on this whole concept of being well-rounded. Now, I think that is okay, but I'm going to say that there's something to be said about, if you know what your strength is, to really focus and maximize your strength, and then outsource to where you're weaker. Like, you wouldn't ask, and I'm going to use, for lack of another analogy that pops in my head, but you wouldn't take like Babe Ruth, like a home run hitter, and be like, hey, why don't you work on your bunting?
Yeah.
You just wouldn't do it, because it would make no sense. You'd say, here's what you're great at doing, become even greater, become the greatest. So post-college, what happens post-creative writing masters?
Okay, so by then I had met this guy, and so I just ended up staying in Wales because I thought, well, I just didn't really know what else I was going to do with my life.
You're like, I ain't going back to Mississippi, because although there is a town called Brooklyn in Mississippi, it's not that Brooklyn.
Oh my gosh, is there really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, we would get calls, and I was like, hey, where are you calling from? Brooklyn. I was like, not that Brooklyn. Like, wouldn't it suck to grow up in a place like a town that has the name, and it's also Philadelphia, Mississippi, when you go up by Jackson?
Oh, yeah.
But wouldn't it suck to be like, yeah, I'm from Philadelphia, but not that one?
Yeah. Yeah. Always having to explain. Yeah.
So you meet this guy, and what happens there?
Well, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I look back on my 20s, and like, with that kind of hindsight, the clarity of the hindsight, looking back at it all, I realized that, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I also wasn't ready to actively search. And a lot of the decisions that I made were based on, well, I don't know what I want to do, so I'll just stay where I am. I'll stick with what I know. And so I stayed in Wales, and I ended up, even though that guy and I weren't together for the whole time, we broke up eventually. I stayed in Wales for a total of like 11 years.
Wow, that's a nice chunk of time, and I'm sure it had a lot of influence on who you are today.
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, Wales will always have a place in my heart, and I mean, I even like learned a bit of Welsh, little bit of the language, and it led me, of course, it led me down the path that I'm on today. It was when I was in Wales that I discovered yoga.
Yes, and that's what I want to talk about. So what drew you into yoga? Can you take me back to your first class in Wales? Like the setting, like was it in a gym, was it in a studio? Like what happens that you're struck with the yoga bug or you hear about it? How does that happen?
Well, first of all, I will preface it with a little story about my very first yoga class, which actually was in Mississippi when I was 18 years old, freshman at Southern Miss. And, you know, at the time, I think Madonna was talking about like how great yoga is. And so I was like, okay, this yoga stuff's supposed to be good. And I went to a class and I hated it. And I walked out of there thinking, yoga sucks. And I don't think I went to another class for about 9 years.
Adell, can I ask you, was the class given through the college or through the university?
Yeah.
And what was it that you didn't like about it? I'm just trying to get the feel of what that class was like and why it turned
it was just, it was one of these classes, like probably the instructor, I really don't remember it.
Sure.
But probably the instructor wasn't really properly trained in yoga, and I remember just slipping. I don't even know, maybe I didn't have a mat, or the mat wasn't very good or something. And I remember, like, you know, Warrior 2, I was just slipping.
Yeah, it was like a split.
Yeah, and I remember like laughing at myself for slipping, and my friend was there as well. And then the instructor was kind of like no laughing, and
really
just, yeah, like and I don't really remember much. I just remember like not enjoying it because I was seeing that everybody else like wasn't slipping around on their mat, and I was.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, and I don't know, I just walked out of there thinking like, no, that's not for me.
Maybe the instructor could have helped you.
Yeah, and like I always tell people now, because I look back on that and I just think, you know, what if somebody had told me, don't worry if you didn't enjoy, this doesn't comprise all of yoga.
Yes.
Would I have gone back to a different yoga class with a different instructor or a different style? I don't know. But for whatever reason, you know, it just, it didn't work for me at the time.
Sure.
But I do always tell people, like, if you go to your first yoga class and you hate it, don't write yoga off. Write that class off. Write that teacher off, even if that teacher is me. If it's fine that there are so many different styles of yoga and so many different teachers within each style that I really do think that yoga is for everyone. But I guess it wasn't for me at the time with what was offered in that community in that area. And
so how did you find your way back? Because like you said, a lot of times it's unfortunate. It's actually sad that people just write it off, and for whatever reason, the class didn't resonate with them. And they say in their mind, well, it's nothing that the person did wrong, like the student, but in their mind that this class represents all of yoga, which is not true, but it happens. It definitely happens. And it's sad because they're missing out on what could be this transformative, life-changing thing that they could keep with them throughout their whole life. So how did you find your way back into it?
Well, fast forward, 9 years or something. And I was in a job it was good. I enjoyed it, but it was at times stressful. And
what kind of job was it?
I worked for the Welsh government.
Wow. You got really inundated there, Adell.
Well, it wasn't anything. Wales has a population of 3 million. It's not like it wasn't like a super important job. I was working, just, it was, like as part of a project to, help people in deprived areas be more physically active using the natural environment instead of like feeling like they needed to go to a gym or something like that, but going for a walk up in the mountains, that kind of thing.
I think that's a very important job.
It was. I'm not saying it was like it wasn't important. It just wasn't like something.
You weren't a diplomat.
No, yeah, exactly.
But what a beautiful thing. What a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, it was lovely. I loved it. But it was at times stressful, and I remember I had a couple of housemates that I found difficult to share my space with. And so I was just a little bit, had some stress and some anxiety, and I had some some imbalances in my body that were creating pain that I think maybe came from gymnastics. And so kind of, I guess all of this kind of happened at once, that I went to see a couple of different specialists. I saw a physiotherapist and I saw a chiropractor, and both of them mentioned to me that yoga could be helpful. And a friend of mine told me about an app that she was using to just do her yoga practice at home. And also, to complete the whole kind of picture, my sister told me, she was like, you should get on Instagram. Like, there's these people and they do all this really cool stuff. And she told me a few of these Instagram yogis to follow. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of a combination of being told by a couple of different specialists that yoga could be helpful. Seeing on Instagram people doing things that I never considered were yoga, like these arm balances and handstands, and me with my very athletic gymnastics background, that was what appealed to me more than like the, just sitting and stretching.
How many years ago was this, Adell? I'm just curious because of Instagram. I was late on the train, so I'm just curious.
I think this must be like about 4 years ago.
Okay.
I guess. And so that, and then also the app that I used, it had like beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And, I came to yoga very much with an ego. And so my ego was like, oh, I'm doing the advanced classes.
Sure.
And actually they were challenging enough with a few little arm balances and stuff like that in it, that I would do like 30 minutes, or I would do a 60-minute class. And whenever I finished, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I wasn't thinking about all of the stressful things in my life. I wasn't thinking about my job. I wasn't thinking about my annoying housemates. And I found that, as well as it just being fun to like move my body in these new ways, that I was getting this like mental clarity. And so then that's kind of what hooked me, was this combination of knowing that it was going to be good for my body and help me with all the aches and pains that I had developed. Yeah, like I remember there were times I would do 60 minutes on the app.
Yes.
And then that would finish and I'd be like, oh, I'm going to do another one. And I would do hours of yoga. And it wasn't so much for the physical. It was because it took me out of my mind, out of everything that was going on in my mind. And that's when it started to like make sense what I was reading on Instagram. Cause then I was following more and more people, and I was seeing some of these Instagram yogis were yoga teachers, and they were talking about things that were yoga that were an asana. And I remember Googling, like, what is asana? Like, oh, that's just the movement. There's more to yoga than just the physical. And I remember like reading about the importance of the breath and the meditation and the mudras. And I learned all of this stuff through Instagram.
Yeah.
And through the people that I followed on there. And so then I started like getting really curious of like, there's got to be more out there. And I started like taking every yoga class I could find in Cardiff, where I was living in Wales. And I found a couple of teachers who, one was power yoga and one was an Ashtanga class. And and found them, and I found like a little community of other yogis and people who were working on handstands and stuff as well. And it just really like just took off from there. And more like over the next probably just 6 months, I went from being somebody who was like, oh, what's yoga, to I became like that yoga girl to all of my friends.
You fell in love.
Yeah, like all of my friends, like if they saw, you know, I was like, if they saw something on internet that was about yoga, then they would like put it on my Facebook page. They'd be like, oh, hey, you're that yoga person, so you might like this. And
I have to say, I watched one of your videos today on your Instagram at Adell Bridges.
Yep.
And the sequence was really nice. I mean, it was really beautiful and also challenging. So, and I could see your gymnastics background. And the thing that I wanted to ask you, going back to your gymnastics, very briefly, we'll fast forward back to yoga. Did you do the floor exercise? Was that one of your best activity or events?
Yeah, the floor and beam. Beam was actually my favorite.
Okay.
Yeah, but
I felt like I was watching a little bit of a floor routine and I say that as a compliment. I'm saying like there was this flow to it and this movement and challenging, but yet within the challenging portions, it would transition so effortlessly. And I really liked it. It was really cool.
Sure. I think, you know, when you do something as a young child for so many years, and I was a competitive gymnast, so that meant being in the gym for 25 hours a week.
It's insane.
From the, you know, like 6, 7, 8 years old, like training, you know, 20, sometimes 25 hours a week. It I think stays with you. I mean, like literally, I'm sure if Tom Myers was a part of this conversation, he would jump in with how it, you know, it like molded my fascia, and I still have that, what is it that he says? Movement organizes the fascia. And so all of the movements that I was doing for all of those many, many hours as a child, has molded my fascia. And of course the fascia just is kind of everything in the body. It wraps around all the cells, and so it is still very much a part of me.
No doubt.
As I'm moving through my yoga, that these kind of gymnastics style movements kind of come out, I guess. Yeah.
Think about riding a bike, and then for like 15 years you just don't ride a bike, and then you get back on, you're like riding a bike. So I think it's like, you know, to a lesser degree, you know, as far as the bike goes in gymnastics, I mean, there's a lot more skills and challenges being wired into your fascia and into your brain than riding a bike, perhaps. But I totally agree with that. For me, it was tennis. I would spend hours and hours on the court. Now, I could jump back on a court now, and it will take me about, you know, 2 minutes of forehands over the fence before I get my timing down, but the wiring is still there. It doesn't go away, you know?
Yeah.
So what inspired you to then go from these studios to do your teacher training, and how long were you practicing in the studio setting before you decided to become a teacher or go for your training?
Well, not very long, really. So as I mentioned, I became like, to all of my work colleagues, to all of my friends, I was like that yoga girl. And there wasn't that much yoga in the area. And most of it was like kind of just in gyms. People would just do like yoga as like their post-workout stretch, or it was older people trying to, you know, maintain their balance as they got older. And so I feel like, a lot of people would kind of see what I was posting on Facebook and Instagram. And I was getting asked to teach by like people at work and my friends and all of this, and I was and people kept telling me, like, you should be a teacher, you should be a teacher. And I remember I was like, no, I haven't been doing it for long enough. And I have a history of getting really interested in one particular hobby and doing it for about 6 months or a year, and then just like turning my back on it and never going back to it again because I'm over it. Like I have so many little like skills that I don't use anymore. Like I can spin wool on a spinning wheel.
Nice.
That was my hobby for a little while. I remember saying like, no, I want to see if I'm going to stick with yoga just as a student for at least 2 years before I start teaching. And that was like my measurement. But nevertheless, I was offering, like, people were still asking me to teach them. So I was teaching. Of course, I wasn't charging them because I was like, guys, I don't know if I'm doing this right. But so I was actually already teaching people. And then it was kind of like, you know, the universe or God or whoever, like whatever you want to call it, was like, nope, Adell, you're doing it all wrong. I'm going to intervene. And so I was, the job that I had, the lovely job in the Welsh government helping deprived people to do more physical exercise, the government turned around and said, oh, we're not going to fund that anymore. You've got until the end of the financial year, and then you've got to find another job.
Classic.
And then also my landlord said, oh, I'm going to sell the house, so you've got 2 months, and then you need to move out.
Oh, God.
Then I was with a guy, and I was in love with him, and in my mind we were going to get married and be together forever and ever. And on New Year's Day, he told me, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. And so I was heartbroken. I was living in Wales where I have no family, and told that I was going to have no job and no house. And so I was just like, okay, this is a sign. This is definitely a sign for me to just leave. And so
I'm just going through this with you, and I'm like, it's just, I feel my heart breaking, but I know that if you're the type of person who can use those moments to spur you to the next place, it could actually be something you look back on as a gift.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I had been through something similar before, not quite as intense, but yeah, I kind of knew, even though it was so painful and so difficult, and I cried myself to sleep so many nights, there was still kind of like this knowledge, because I had been through something very difficult before. I knew I was going to come out the other end and it was going to be better. And so, yeah, one of my friends said, well, look, I really think that you should be a yoga teacher. Why don't you go and do your teacher training? And I thought, yeah, okay, that's what I'm going to do.
What a good friend.
Yeah.
If you would have been back in pedal, then he just would have said, oh, bless your heart.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like the response to everything.
So where did you do the teacher training?
So, well, I went to India because I had always wanted to go to India.
Yes.
Of course, I read that book, Shantaram, or however you say it.
Yoga's life. It's okay. We have dogs barking at our interviews. It's fine.
There's a dog and a cat, and they don't like each other.
Oh.
I'm sorry about that.
No, you can only imagine what we've had. We're 70 interviews deep.
Okay, yeah. Bless their hearts.
Yeah.
I think the cat like swiped at the dog. So yeah, so I just thought, well, this is my opportunity to finally go to India, and of course, India is the birthplace of yoga. What better place to do it? And so that's what I did. I went to India, and it was like, so, I mean, everybody told me, oh, yoga teacher training is life changing. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, cool. I'm about to have my life changed. And sure enough, it just, I mean, it was such a turning point in my life for everything.
Can I ask you, before I get to more the transformational pieces, what was one of the biggest challenges for you during your training, especially, you know, going to take it in India? There's always challenges that come up in teacher training. For you, is there one that stands out?
Well, yeah, so I remember I actually was crying about it at one point in my teacher training because I was very much one of these people. I came to yoga from the physical practice, and with my gymnastics background, I was quote unquote good at asana.
Yeah.
And I totally got like the importance of breathing. I was into like the pranayama and you know, as I explained before, like the mental clarity that I got, I was cool with all of that. But as soon as I got to India and I had to do like chanting, I found that very difficult. And because I was like, I don't know what I'm saying, like, why should I have to be chanting in a language that I don't even understand? And
Sure.
it was really, really difficult for me. And I think it was also because a lot of the other people at the training, they were the opposite to me. They had come to yoga through meditation, and like some of them had already done like Vipassana before. And
Wow. Okay.
you know, they were like, oh, let's do a kirtan. And I'm like, what is a kirtan? I don't even know. And they found, and it's funny, like looking back, and we're all like really, like we still keep in touch, and we're all really good friends now. And I'm actually going to one of them. They're running a retreat this summer, and I'm going to their retreat. So like we all came through it okay in the end, but
Yeah.
learned from each other. But at the time, they were kind of intimidated by me with my advanced asana practice.
Right. How many people were in your group?
There were like 23 of us, I think.
And what about facilitators of the training?
Oh, I think we had like 10.
10?
Yeah.
Wow.
We had so many.
Jeez.
Yeah, that was one of the things I loved about my school is we had lots of different teachers.
That is really cool.
Yeah, but what I think I didn't realize was I was kind of intimidated by them. I was intimidated by the yogis who came to it, who their meditation and you know, their knowledge of the history and the philosophy and everything, that intimidated me. And so that's something that I like to point out to people whenever some people say like that somebody with a very advanced asana practice can intimidate somebody away from doing yoga, that also somebody with a very advanced meditation practice or whatever, like anything can be intimidating to somebody. And really it comes back to us allowing ourselves to be intimidated.
That's I love that. I mean, that's definitely a soundbite that I could take and make to use for the promo of the show, because I really feel it doesn't come up, at least in my mind. That gem that you just said has not come up in recent interviews, or if at all, but we perceive these things that are not from the direct path that we walk as superior, and we get intimidated. But meanwhile, they may be thinking the same thing, and then eventually I imagine what happened, because you stay in touch with each other, is that there was a mutual respect for both sides of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like that's what I came to realize was I was allowing myself to feel intimidated by people who had been you know, chanting and doing kirtan, and you know, they had been to Peru and done ayahuasca and all of this kind of stuff.
Oh, that's so funny you brought that up. I'll admit, when I don't know something, I just found out about that, and I'm like all researching it. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but I'm thinking about it. Have you ever done it?
No, I'm thinking about it. I feel like it's something yeah, like I want to do it at some point in my life, but I want it to be when it feels right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but yeah, so I realized that I was allowing myself to be intimidated by them, and equally, if somebody was intimidated by the fact that, you know, my legs go into a 180 split and my three-legged dog, that's not my fault. They are allowing themselves to be intimidated by my, you know, flexibility or whatever, and that's when the yoga comes in, is because, you know, if you're intimidated by somebody, then that's the ego.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, like, that became the yoga. And
Yeah.
at the end of my teacher training, I was like, hey guys, there's a kirtan tonight. Like, do you want to go? And so I came through it at the end, and now, oh my gosh, I love the chanting. I love, you know, learning more about like the mudras and the you know, all of that kind of like stuff that I would have called like some hippy dippy woo stuff that's like not for me before. But
Yeah.
you know, just looking back at that as my own journey, I it's 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 important to remember like that we are all on our own individual journeys. Like
Amen.
we talked about at the beginning, that we have to find what works for us in every way, and yoga of course is not any exception. And if somebody is more interested in one aspect of yoga than another, then that's great. Like whatever it is that gets them into, like, kind of gets them through the door.
You know, I think what happened to you with them looking at you and being intimidated and judging happens in all areas of life, at workplaces. And I think what you did was great, because unfortunately sometimes, and people play smaller to appease the people that may be like, oh, well, look at so-and-so. And I don't think it's egotistical to play at your level. I think it's wrong to have to lower your level of ability to lessen yourself. I think that's a mistake that people make to appease the crowd.
This is what I always try and point out on my Instagram, is that I share my journey and I share what I have found works for me. And it's just me sharing, and I'm never asking anybody to do what I do, or
Yeah.
or even trying to portray that anybody should be trying to do what I do. That it's just me sharing my journey as perhaps inspiration to others, but not as like a rule. And so it always kind of makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable whenever I see comments like on my videos and people saying like, how can I do this, or I want to be able to do this. And I'm like, well, that's great, like if it's inspiration, but don't actually try and do it if it's like going to cause you harm, or if it's going to make you feel bad about yourself, or whatever.
Absolutely. And then secretly you direct message them and go, hey, have you heard about ayahuasca?
No, not yet, but maybe I will.
So I'm fascinated with moving forward into your life as a traveling yoga teacher. After your training, how did you evolve into this teacher who forms this path?
Well, it was because of Instagram, and I was following a lot of these yoga teachers and seeing that they do travel around the world to teach. So I already, it's funny, like I remember kind of having this vision of me doing that, but then it was like, then the logical, practical voice would be like, no, Adell, that won't ever happen. That won't be you. Because it was like, I kind of like dreamed about it, I guess, but then I didn't know how I was going to get there.
Yeah.
But I always wanted to do it because I always loved traveling, and I always kind of felt homeless, I guess. As soon as I left Mississippi, I knew I didn't want to go back there. And living in Wales, I always felt like it was temporary. I always felt like this is temporary, even though I was there for like a third of my life.
So how did you make it happen? Because I mean, you don't just go on like a retreat every 3 months. Like, I mean, you are booked up solid all over the place.
Well, it was, so I have to say, when I first went back to Wales and was just starting to get teaching jobs. A couple of the studios that I had been a student at very kindly took me on as a yoga instructor.
That's cool.
And I was just really getting started. I went to a festival in England where I saw a few yoga teachers who I knew were total nomads traveling around. And I asked them, I was like, how do you do it? How did you get started? And I remember the one that really stuck in my mind, it really struck me. It was, he's a French guy, Matthew Baldwin. I don't know if you know him.
I always tell people, if I don't know a name or like a trend or a topic or anything, like I am the most, it means nothing because I don't know so many things. So I'm sure he's very well known amongst the people
I'm sure some
yeah.
of the people listening to this will know. Like,
I can guarantee it.
But he looked me in the eye and he said, I bought a flight. And to me, that was just like, whoa, like mind blowing, because it was, like he didn't need to say anything else to me. I got it. Like what he meant was, there's no like checklist that you follow. And like, once I do all this, once I have like this amount of training or this amount of experience or this amount of money, then I'll be ready. It's not about that. It's just taking the action.
Yes.
Book of life. If you want to go to Thailand, go to Thailand. If you, like whatever it is, like you can dream about something for years and years while you sit on your couch at home. But at the end of the day, you've got to take action.
Yeah. There's no perfect time. And there's only a limited amount of time that we have. Exactly. So do it.
And so I was still kind of unsure, like how though. I was like, how do you just like show up into a country and then do yoga?
Yes, please tell me.
Over the next few months, I just it was just in my mind. And so like everything that I did was centered around trying to make this happen. And so everybody I spoke to, every conversation I had, if there was a little piece of that kind of stuck out to me, like, oh, hey, like, oh, do you know something that I don't know? Like, or is there an opportunity here or whatever? And I just started, I was emailing all of my friends from my yoga teacher training, all my fellow new yoga teachers, if they knew of a studio that would have me as a guest. And I got lots and lots and lots of no's and even more silences.
Yeah, you can't let that stop you.
Yeah, I just kept emailing. I emailed a retreat center in Morocco where I had gone as a guest to a yoga retreat and asked them if they were looking for teachers. I messaged like other yoga teachers, and actually one of the yoga teachers that I messaged was Dylan Werner.
Yes.
I met him a couple of times, and I just said to him, I was like, oh, hey, I saw that you're starting to do teacher trainings now. If you ever need anybody to help you, just keep me in mind. And I saw that he had read the message.
Yeah.
He didn't respond. And I was like, okay, whatever,
Sure.
He gets asked that all the time. And, he's like famous and stuff. So, no big deal. So I went to Thailand, and that was just an excuse to go traveling somewhere. But while I was in Thailand, even though I wasn't there for yoga, I was kind of offered a couple of opportunities to teach just because I was there, and I'm obsessed with yoga, and so I was talking about yoga, and I realized, like, okay, just being here in this environment like that, none of this stuff I would have found if I was searching online, but just talking to people while here has led to potential opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so that was a big lesson, was just being in a place, you're gonna, like, you come across people who want to practice yoga and are looking for somebody who knows more about yoga than they do, and they are willing to pay you for it, whether it's a retreat center or somebody that's just built like a yoga platform on the beach, and they're like, cool, I've got a yoga platform, now I need a yoga teacher. And they're like not online. And you just, like, as scary as it is to think about going to a place with no plans, that's what I discovered for me anyway, was the best way to connect and to have opportunities come to me was just to actually be there. But then going back to Dylan, I was quite lucky. So I know that this is not something that would happen for everybody, but for some reason I caught Dylan's eye. I mean, he and I had met a couple of times, and he was following me on Instagram, and I guess like me asking him if he ever needed an assistant, even though he didn't respond at the time, it stuck in his mind. And then one day he messaged me and said, I need an assistant. Would you be willing to travel around Asia with me? So I was like,
sure, yeah.
Let me just check my calendar. Yeah. But actually I was super excited, and I was like, yes, of course.
Yeah.
So that was how it kind of got started for me, was so he asked me to do that. That was in February, and I was in Thailand, and I thought, okay, that would mean I have 3 weeks between getting back to the UK from Thailand and leaving for China with Dylan. And so I thought, okay, this is it. This is there's no better opportunity than this. Right. So in those 3 weeks, I got rid of all of my stuff. I gave it away. I sold it. I threw it away, whatever. Yeah. Closed down everything. I, sold my car to my friends. Redirected my mail to a friend's house so she could like check my mail for me. Yeah. And off I went. And so I traveled with Dylan for 6 weeks, and that was great because I got to see firsthand how he does the whole nomadic thing, and how he runs his workshops, how he organizes his travel plans, and all of this stuff. And so then we finished traveling together in Nicaragua, and he went off to continue traveling, and I stayed in Nicaragua, where I got a teaching job just by being there. Like I said, I was just there talking to somebody, and she mentioned, oh, we're always looking for yoga teachers. So I was like, oh, I'm a yoga teacher. Wow. And then I stayed in Nicaragua for a couple of months, just teaching in exchange for food and accommodation. I didn't get paid anything, but it meant that I had lots of free time. Yes. And I spent that free time, again, just getting back on like the hustle, like messaging everybody I knew. And I would put on my Instagram things like, hey, I travel the world teaching yoga. If you want me to come and teach at your studio, just get in touch. And things just kind of happened from there.
Ask and it is given. Sometimes you have to ask a lot, but it does happen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I think that's a good lesson, just hearing your story. You're persistent, and don't let your nose shut you down, expect that your nose means that you're doing something right, because, keep going.
Yeah. And I will say as well, there were days where I felt like such a heaviness on my chest. I literally felt like I couldn't breathe. I mean, I guess maybe that an anxiety attack, I don't know. Sure. But I was like, what am I doing? What have I done? I had like this perfectly comfortable life in Cardiff. I had a steady income. I had a house. Like, why did I give all of this up? What am I doing? And then I would get an email from somebody saying, hey, would you like to run a retreat at our retreat center or whatever? And so, I just want to say it wasn't like just easy, like it felt comfortable, like everything fell into place, no problem. Like there were times where I felt so frightened and like so sure that I had done the wrong thing. But, I've been nomadic now for over a year, and things now fall into place much easier.
Yeah, so I want to ask you about that. I can only imagine doing the lifestyle you're doing and teaching in all these different places that there's been some crazy moments along the way. So can you recall the most bizarre thing that's ever happened while teaching on the road, and maybe where was it and what happened?
Just in general, or
Sure.
like yoga related?
Anything really. I mean, it's yoga related if it's on your journey and your path. Sure.
Oh, I got bitten by a shark.
What?
Yeah, in the Maldives, and the sharks don't bite there. They're super shy and they swim away. Like they never ever bite people. So I feel very lucky that I did get bitten.
Oh, where did it bite you?
On my foot. It was just a little baby shark, so it was
Okay.
like maybe a meter long or so.
Sure.
And the reason it happened is I was jet lagged. I was 10 hours jet lagged, and
Yeah.
the previous night I was up at like 3:00 in the morning and couldn't sleep. So I thought, oh, I'll go swimming, and that was really nice. And then once again I woke up really early, and I think it was like 5:00 in the morning that I woke up, and I thought, well, that was really nice to go swimming in the middle of the night last night, so I'll do it again. But this time it was a bit later, and the sun wasn't yet over the horizon, but it was, starting to get a little bit light in the sky. And just outside where I was staying, the little beach area there's some reefs. And what I didn't realize is that the black-tipped reef sharks, they hunt at dawn and at dusk.
Oh boy.
And they hunt amongst the reefs. And I was also just happened to be wearing like some metallic nail polish.
Yeah, you were a shiny, pretty attractive thing for hunger.
Yeah, so I think that it was just a mixture of all of these things. The fact that it wasn't yet light enough that the shark could see properly, I guess, but light enough that maybe a little glimmer from my nail polish looked like a fish. And
Yep.
It was when it was hunting, and yeah, the poor thing thought I was breakfast, basically. So I had just waded in. I took like 4 or 5 steps into the water. I was only about knee deep. And just out of nowhere, this fish comes and clamps onto my foot and starts thrashing. And then, this all happened in like a second. But then poor thing realized that I wasn't a fish and swam away, probably much more frightened than I was.
Yeah.
And yeah, so then I've still got like some teeth marks in my foot.
Yeah, I mean, even a baby shark has shark teeth.
Yeah. So yeah, I couldn't, I was like down 1 foot for a few days. So that affected my yoga, I guess. So in that way it's yoga related.
Absolutely.
But I love sharks. I just think that they're wonderful creatures. So I was never, like, everybody else was like so scared and everything, and I was like, no way, you guys, I'm so lucky. Like, I'm so honored. Like, I got bitten by a shark, and like in the best possible way, because I didn't lose any toes. Like, I'm fine. There's maybe like I think there's maybe a ligament that got kind of severed or something.
Wow.
Not perfectly the way it was in my ankle, but that's okay.
Did you go to the hospital where you were in Maldives?
Yeah, like, well, there was a doctor. There's a doctor on that island.
Okay.
And she was able, like, she basically just was like, I can't really do anything about this. But just kind of like gave me what I needed to keep it clean and gave me antibiotics to make sure that it didn't get infected.
Good enough. Not the answer you wanted to hear, but good enough.
Yeah.
So back to yoga and teaching. A lot of times new teachers come into situations where there are all level classes, and there's people who they don't know are going to be in the room, even if they teach at that studio all the time, or a gym or whatever. But for you especially, traveling all around, how do you approach your classes, and what advice can you offer a teacher who may be walking into a class for the first time that has no clue about who will be in the room? And it could be all sorts of levels.
Well, I always, like, no matter what I'm teaching, I start with something that, well, I mean, first of all, I teach workshops for the most part. So
Okay, I got
the
you.
workshop is on handstands. I kind of trust that somebody that's like never done a handstand in their life and like has never done, that doesn't even know the first thing about handstands, they're maybe not going to come unless it's like, because I don't market it as handstands for beginners. I market it as like, learn how to bring your handstand practice into your vinyasa.
Yes.
Or that kind of thing. And I'm always teaching something quite specific, but I start with a very basic skill. If you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Start on a basic level, and then I always I say it so many times in all of my workshops and classes, like, if this is where you are, then feel good about staying here. But if you want to take it a step further, this is another option. And if you want to take it a step further from there, this is another option. And these are just options. Explore what feels good for you today,
Yeah.
So just starting with something basic and just letting people know that maybe in the gymnastics world or the circus world or whatever other kind of movement world, that you become more advanced by being able to do something that's even like more physically challenging. But in yoga, if anything, if you do want to call something advanced, then it's not what you can do with your body. It's that ability to look around the room, or maybe not look around the room, and not compare yourself to others, and not go into anything based on what you think you should be doing or some expectation, or based on anything that your ego is telling you, but rather to be happy with where you are in your journey.
Amen.
And so, but I also know that it's nice for people to try something new, try something that they haven't done before, try something that challenges them. And so, a lot of the times, I see people, and they're just like, no, I don't want to try that. Or they'll say like, I can't do that. And sometimes I'll be like, I don't know. I guess I've seen a little bit of what they're doing already, or I just have a feeling, and I'll say, yes, you can. I like to kind of encourage people to try at least doing something that challenges them, because that's the other side of it is,
Yes.
Yes, be happy with where you are in your journey, but don't tell yourself a story that you can't do something before you've even tried it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can just tell them, look, I was bit by a shark. So
yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah, that can just be my answer to everything.
It can. So
so what, Adell? Well, I got bitten by a shark. That's what.
so clearly, you've worked hard to get where you are, but a lot of times when people are successful, there's people from the outside looking in thinking that it just happened overnight. They don't really see the work and the path. They see the success. And they don't realize what went into it. And sometimes there can be some envy, and with success, there could be some contempt from people in the same industry that you work in, no matter what it is. So have you ever encountered that, where there has been some of that envy and contempt that came your way?
Oh, I don't know. If I have, then I was oblivious to it. Everybody I meet is so lovely.
Okay. I just figured I'd throw it out there.
Me. No. I don't know. I always just think about the journey that we're all on. And like, no matter what, like if somebody's reaction is towards something is not something that I would agree with, then I just think, well, that's where they are on their journey.
Sure.
And where I am on my journey from, you know, maybe somebody else looking at me, for example, they are going to see something entirely different to what I see. Just as if, you know, if we're all like kind of walking along like a mountain range, you might be like one mountain over and looking over at me, and you might be able to see things that I can't see, and I'll be able to see things that you can't see. And so, you know, from my point of view, I might be thinking like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what is like, I'm like making it up as I go along. But somebody else looking in might think, oh, she's got it all figured out.
That is a lot of truth right there. So besides all over the earth, where can people connect with you? And of course, I will send you an email to make sure I have all my show notes correct. But just for the sake of the people listening right now, the most typical, obvious places to catch you.
Sure. Instagram is like the biggest platform for me.
Okay.
At the moment, and that's at Adell Bridges.
Perfect.
I'm also on Facebook, Adell Bridges Yoga.
Okay.
My website is adellbridges.com. It's all very easy. It's just my name.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, I think I can get this all right.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Let's see. That's probably, yeah, I mean, you can get in touch with me. Like on my website, I've got a contact form, or you can email me through Instagram. Just hit the email button on my bio. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, Adell, it's been a pleasure to hear about your story, and it's certainly been one of persistence and discovery at the same time. And I can appreciate that. And I imagine, you know, people listening can appreciate that as well, whether they practice yoga, teach it, or they're just listening about someone's life story. It's definitely one that is valuable, and I'm glad that you put it out there. So I look forward to hearing more about you and seeing more about you by following you on your Instagram. And I appreciate you for being on the Yoga Moves You podcast.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure and an honor. I appreciate you reaching out to me, and yeah, it's been great chatting.
Thank you so much, Adell.
Thank you.
Yoga Moves You podcast.